Well, the health issues that I am currently dealing with really started during a missions trip to Russia. Didn't really start there, but that's where they became really evident. I'd had some, just in the few days before the missions trip, some urinary tract problems kind of thing, but they were more or less typical of what somebody in their 60s has anyway, so I didn't think anything about it. And then during the 2 weeks that we were in Russia, that really escalated. So I called Evelyn and said, things aren't right, and I don't know what though is going on, and so please get me a doctor's appointment as soon as I get home. So we got home, and on a Thursday, I believe it was, and on Friday morning, things backed up into my kidneys and all, and it was severely painful, so I went into emergency. Thankfully, somebody in the church got me a doctor's appointment the following Monday with a urologist up here. And essentially he began to go down the track, which it seemed like was the issue of what's wrong with this bladder. And they looked for bladder cancer, and they'd have all these other fancy things they do. And then on the end of January 25th, we met with the doctor, and to his surprise and to our shock, it seemed, he said, well, you do have prostate cancer, and you have an advanced kind of cancer. It's aggressive, it's a high-grade kind of a cancer. It's very unusual, and this isn't normally the way it should be. It's not what I expected, and don't think you're going to solve this problem in one easy trip to a doctor somewhere. Be prepared to go on a journey to, deal with this over a period of time. And I think for me, the emotion in the early days as we tried to figure out what does this mean was this sort of overwhelming sadness. And the sadness was really the possibility of not being able to experience the things that we had imagined we would experience over the next 10 or 20 years. And that probably first and foremost had to do with growing up with the grandkids. Watching them grow up, being a part of their lives, and that sort of thing. It's, by the way, terrible to see yourself on the screen. So the next time the creative arts team welcomes you into that opportunity, think twice. No, do it.
And it's been a journey, and I'll say on behalf of myself and my family, our family, and then this family too, that thanks for being a model through that and continuing on, one who has lived out a sort of Paul, rejoice, always kind of life. And I want to ask, even though you didn't answer it in the first service, I thought I'd give it a shot in the second. Not only because we care, but I'd also like to make it to a dinner in town sometime without being asked. How are you doing? How's Dad? How's your dad doing? Because a lot of us care. And what does it look like?
Well, this is a season where not much is changing, hopefully, and not much is going on. The more full explanation is what was put on the website early near the end of the radiation treatments in June. And thankfully, and there's my short answer that I have given to many of you and you've asked too, is that I feel fine. And underneath there's a whole bunch of things that aren't right and aren't the way we want them to be, and that are side effects of the medication that's trying to correct the things that aren't the way they're supposed to be. And so I always tell people, as you always say, we're praying for you, please keep it up. Thankfully, this whole other layer doesn't really affect very much of the way I live normal life on the surface right now. And hopefully it never will. Hopefully it'll get better and change as well. And so for almost all of life, it's normal, and for that I'm very thankful. But if you're inclined to, and even not, I would appreciate your prayers, because there's a lot of stuff yet that's not right. All the stuff that was wrong before the cancer is still wrong.
And now you have some stuff because of treating cancer, and of course the potential of more cancer also is there as well. So there's plenty of reason for me to be thankful for your faithfulness in praying. So I appreciate that. So that's kind of it. There isn't much that changes now.
And as you say, there's this sort of stuff underneath that isn't the way you want it to be. But there's all this other, who you are, and have been to us and have been to me as a son, that Paul says is the most important. How have you wrestled through the anxiety that wants to sneak in to that lower level of stuff that you can't control, and allowed you even through this to lean in harder, more passionately to the things that really matter? What does that look like for you?
We talked a little bit last night about this, trying to figure out how to do it. We never could figure out how to do it. But one of the things that you mentioned last night, which made some sense to me, was how, when Paul was in prison, his life really went on. His ministry continued, his relationships continued. He still woke up in the morning, he still had to decide whether to be joyful or crappy, and so forth and so on. He just happened to do it from a prison cell for a while, but the same life. The circumstances changed on the outside somewhat, considerably, but it didn't change his life. And thankfully, that's kind of the way this particular thing has been for me. In some ways, it's not as upsetting as having a bad cold, which wipes you out, and you lay in bed, and sniffle, and you don't want to get up, and you don't have any energy, and you feel crummy, and so forth. In many ways, this is like way more, concerning. A lot of them, certainly. But, a radiation treatment, you just go to the hospital for 15 minutes, slide in this machine, and slide out, and they say, give you a piece of candy, and say, go on your way. You still got 23 hours.
What's in a piece of candy?
Yeah.
It's an expensive piece of candy.
The other 23 hours and 45 minutes of the day is exactly the same as it's always been. And that's sort of, I think, been nice. It's not like people who, I visited a number of our folks who were in terrible treatment situations during this time, where their whole life was rocked, and they just totally had to be withdrawn from anything normal. And, that's a tough deal. It's nice when you can have this layer going on and also have this layer going on pretty much like normal. And I think that's maybe the blessing, is that this sort of thing doesn't disrupt that layer real significantly.
And one of the things we see in Paul, and certainly we're talking about, that we see in you, is that layer has been a layer that said, I'm living for my family, I'm living for the kingdom of God, I'm going to wake myself up in the morning, and the things that God says are the most important have been the things for you that have been most important. And so the other, the health, and some of those, they've gotten rocked, but I don't know, I speak on behalf of myself and us and say, thanks for keeping that stuff going and being an example of what Paul means. You've preached a lot of sermons through this season, but your life and the joy that you have given. And one of those things for me has been watching you say thanks to us as a family, to the church, to the people around you. How has thankfulness sort of been something that has been a root of joy throughout the season?
Well, I think that's really key. Paul begins his letter with, I thankful for all of you. And without question, or whatever, it's a gracious description of my life during this season, so I'll take it for that and appreciate it. But a lot of that has come, as you're alluding to, out of, I think, the generous way people, starting with my family, have been to me. And certainly number one is Evelyn. I have to make it, they edit these videos. We, a couple months ago, sat up here and jabbered on, and they pick out what they want to show. I'm pretty sure I said that what I was doing most sad about was not being able to do with her all the things I wanted to do in the next 10 or 20 years. Not just the grandkids. I'm pretty sure Evelyn was first. Probably wasn't, but it should have been. But Evelyn's journey, obviously, with me through this, and the way she's done that is, been humongous. It's easy to appreciate. And the family as a whole. One of the neat little things when we went down to UCSF for those 5 weeks was the family made those construction paper chains you make as a kid and you put them under a Christmas tree or hang them around? Well, they made one of those with big strips on it, where every one of the links had like a picture of them or me with them or something like that, and then they had written a verse on it, or they had just said, you know, praying for you or whatever they wrote. And every day I was to undo a link, and as a reminder that during all of this journey, this, number one, the chain's getting shorter, but just as the relationship that we have and their gratefulness for that and prayers for me and so forth. And that kind of support, the church family talked a lot about the stacks of cards that come from so many of you and many of you asking and praying. But that sort of thing, you know, I don't know where your head would go if you didn't have that. You know, it could go a lot of places. But I think that's this again. It's the guardian. And one of the things that guards our hearts and that guards our minds is the prayers of God's people and the assurance of our own prayers. And I think that's been, you know, a large measure of whatever degree of that that's happened in this journey.
Well, one of the things that I've thought as you try and pray with these petitions, God, heal them, God, there's also a sense of thanks because we understand that as God allows, God, you know, watches, God, you know, causes, God is in that whole mix, that we get to walk alongside. And it has created in me a new and profound sense of who God is in my relationship with Him and our relationship. I mean, and so I have been able to, and I think we as a family, you know, have that pray with petition, but also thanks. Thankfulness for the years we've had, for the absolute joy it is to even be able to sit here and chat about these things. And then to petition. God, we want another one. God, we want 5 more. God, we want 10 more. And I just say thanks for living that out before all of us. And being in Echo 2,000 years after Paul lived it in prison. As you walk through and out of control, this is what's before me. But with a sense of joy, you know, the sense of, I'm going to do the most important things because those are still here and for me. So thank you for this on behalf of us.